Howdy, howdy, and welcome back. It's another Workshop Wednesday. This week's edition is a strategy session. We're going to talk today about how to tell if your organization is measurement ready for 2023. Of course, before we go too far into this, welcome. If this is your first Workshop Wednesday, my name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. And I'm the co-founder of a company called measurementmarketing.io. Whether you found us through the podcast and talks that we're constantly on, maybe through some of the platforms we share a little bit of our content with, maybe you're already a full-fledged member over at measurementmarketing.io. And that could include the Academy Toolbox Edition, which is free, the Academy for Marketers Edition, the Academy for Professionals Edition, or Academy for Agencies and Teams. If you are serious about learning measurement, hopefully you're already a part of measurementmarketing.io. But however you found us, we're happy that you're here. It's our job to help people like you learn how to use all of these tools. And of course, our flagship tool is the Measurement Marketing Academy. More on that a little bit later on. Right now, though, we're going to talk about one thing. This is the one thing slide because it is important in the world of measurement to focus on one thing at a time because it's so complicated. There's like new tools every other day. You've probably noticed some of this yourself. And so in order to really master this craft, it's a little bit of art, it's a little bit of science, but to really master it, you focus on one new thing at a time. So it could be something slightly different from this training that you've heard in a unique way that makes sense to you, that you can take some action on. Maybe it's a tactic or a technique that might make sense for you that you can take some action on. Whatever your one thing is, write that down. That's the thing you take action on. Then you come back and rewatch this workshop and pick up another new one thing. All right, let's go ahead and get officially underway. Strategy session. Are you measurement ready for 2023? Let's find out. Okay, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Now, normally we always start with the framework, and we're going to kind of do a deeper dive on the framework this go around. We always talk about plan, build, and launch. Those are the 3 steps. And we're trying to solve the problem of people marketing in the blind, and we need to use a system that just produces revenue and profits, right? The activities we go through produce the revenue and profits. So when we plan it, we're going to do a deep dive on this today. But when we plan, we think about the questions we're trying to answer, the information we need to collect, and the actions we're going to take. More on that in just a little bit. Then we go into the build. That's where we're setting up, making sure that our platforms understand the results we're trying to achieve, the traffic and where it's coming from, and of course, a story that tells which traffic is causing which results when we do our proper setups. Then we listen to the conversation that's happening between the users and the website through the trends and patterns. We then move to forecast that conversation. So instead of always marketing backward, we're starting to market forward. And then we measure against our forecast. That's what will tell you what to optimize. And so you know what's working and what's not. That, of course, is the measurement marketing framework in a nutshell. Now, we are going to do a deep dive in this because this is one of the ways that you can tell if you are not measurement ready. Number one is that you do not have a framework. You have to have a framework. You have to have measurement. This is a recipe, if you want to call it, think about it some way different. You can't just bake a cake. I mean, that's not true. You could. You can throw a bunch of ingredients and hope a cake occurs. But if you follow a recipe about how to bake a cake, you're more likely to get the result you're looking for, right? That's what the framework is. It's a recipe for how to use measurement to improve your marketing. So let's do a little bit more of a deeper dive on these 3 steps. Now, the planning is all about results and how questions. That is the secret sauce to your questions. Most individuals, when they first start out, they ask us, like, what questions should we be asking? You should only ever be asking 2 types of questions. It's results about a specific user journey you're trying to measure, things like revenue or products sold, units sold, average cart value. All of that is the result of a customer journey. And then you have the how steps. And those are so much more important because you're probably already asking results style questions, but you're probably not asking how questions. In other words, how did people achieve that purchase? How many saw the product detail page? How many added a cart? How many moved through there? How many started the process to become a donor if maybe you're a nonprofit? How many of those actually initiated the becoming a donor, and how many of those actually became a donor and for what amount? That sort of stuff. Then you move into your information. Now, in information, the secret sauce here is behaviors because it's a mindset shift. You are not measurement ready in your organization if you're not having conversations about what behaviors your website is supposed to be eliciting and encouraging, and is it actually achieving those behaviors? In other words, are your users taking the behaviors, enacting those behaviors, that delivering those behaviors to you that the website is asking them to do. So that might mean if you're a content marketer, scrolling down your blog post, clicking on affiliate links, if that's what your model happens to be. If you're on lead gen, it's how many leads you're getting and are they actually interacting and interested in the different offers that you might be offering for an email. So did they start filling out the form? Did they not even click on the button to fill out the form, right? Before the form popped. All that sort of stuff are the behaviors that you have to measure for in order to see, I should say, in order to answer the questions that you're asking, in order to answer those results and how questions. Then it's all about the actions. Now, this is the part people are skipping, and it's not because they see this and they said, I'm not going to do it. It's because they're just not aware of it. So again, you're not measurement ready if before you start opening the spreadsheets, before you look at Google Analytics, before you look at a report in Looker Studio or anything like that, you already know what actions you're going to take. That's important. In other words, it should be part of your plan. You've already planned ahead and said, well, if the answer, let's say the question is a results question like revenue amount, right? The information you're going to collect is, of course, purchase, the total number of purchases made, let's say. And then you think about the actions. And the reason we call it if this, then that in terms of the behaviors here, or the secret sauce, I should say, is because you think about three different directions. If the answer's lower than what I expect, I'm going to do this. If the answer's higher than what I expect, I'm going to do this other thing. And if the answer's just right or within range, then I'm going to do yet this third action. And you determine all of that before you start measuring anything. And I cannot emphasize enough, if you're not doing these three things, you're already not measurement ready for 2023. You're going to misuse your measurement, or more importantly, you're just not going to get as much from it. And especially if you've got to the point where you've got too much data, not enough story, that's because there's no plan for most of the stuff. If you've got people coming to you saying, we got a bunch of reports, a lot of information, but we have no idea what to do with it, maybe that's you. That's because there was no plan to do something with it. That's why this action step is so important as part of this planning key here. So the actions, as an example for the revenue, like if the revenue we expected was supposed to be between $10,000 and $12,000, and it was, then we're like, great, let's just keep doing that for the next week and maybe try to scale the traffic. That might be an action we're going to take. But if it's less than $10,000, then we go, okay, well, let's go see where the miss was. Maybe there was a certain product we were supposed to sell, it didn't work. If it's substantially higher than, let's say, $15,000, then we go, well, wow, that was also equally unexpected. Let's go see. Maybe there was a holiday seasonal traffic. Maybe we did a holiday promotion that worked really well, or some seasonal promotion that worked really well. Can we get that replicate? Maybe there's a product that all of a sudden is getting really popular in the marketplace and you can see it pop. Then okay, let's maybe scale it out or give it a higher position in the store, right? All these different things you can do, you can think about before you start measuring anything. So if you do not have a plan in place before you start measuring, you're not measurement ready. Make sure you do that first. Remember, the key here, the three keys are questions, information, actions to the first step of planning. Then it's all about the build. And we are going to talk about this a little bit here because some of the tools are rapidly changing. So we're going to do a kind of an overview of the tools in this step as well. But build always starts with the three keys of results, traffic, and story. So results, the reason we say ACE here is because you don't just measure for the end result of the user journey. Yet that's what everyone does. And I get that. I think it's a good place to start. It's definitely good enough to get going, but you really want to come back and make that better. When you're measuring results, you don't just think about the end result you're trying to achieve. You think about the how results as well. Remember that think about results and how. It's what we're trying to measure for. So ACE stands for aware, complete, and engage. So you measure when somebody is aware of the thing you want them to be aware of. Typically, you think about this like a user journey. When they're aware of the specific journey or a category of products you have, something like that, you measure for that. Could be something as simple as a page view that gets recorded. Complete. Did they complete the user journey you wanted them to complete? A lot of times this is going to be a cart purchase or something like that. And you measure that by the thank you page, right? A purchase event that occurs. Then the E. E stands for engagement. So did they engage along the way, and how did they engage along the way? So you measure for things. It might be when they click add to cart might be an engagement step for you. The begin checkout process might be an engagement step for you. If you're a content marketer, your awareness might be any blog post is loaded. The completion might be clicking on an affiliate link, but the engagement step might be time and scroll, and you sort of measure for those different behaviors. The beauty of setting up your results like this is you start to see a natural starting point of the actual story of where the drop-off is. You kind of get a little funnel of how your customer journeys are working, how those user journeys are working. So that's the results step. Then there's traffic. Now, this is where those of you familiar with Google Analytics hopefully already are familiar with UTMs. You need to identify who is sending traffic, what type of traffic are they sending you, and why. Now, the secret sauce to this really comes down to the structure of the UTMs. We won't have a ton of time to go through that today, but we've got lots of training on that in the academy and on the YouTube channel. You can find that stuff out. But you just use UTMs. A UTM underscore source equals, and then the brand name of the traffic source, UTM underscore medium equals the what, the type of traffic. And then the why is the campaign, typically. Just start with those. There are other ones you can use as well, but I would start with the basics and get really good at that so that you know that Facebook sent traffic. Like in our case, we have the Measurement Marketing Academy. So we would say Facebook, CPC. So we know it came from Facebook. We know it's paid traffic. And then we might say Academy is the campaign. So we know Facebook sent paid traffic for the purposes of some stage of the Academy journey. And then that's where the story starts to naturally occur in this setup your setup, which means you got to learn the tool. So a tool like Google Analytics 4, you would learn how to set up conversion events. You can learn how to modify and create events, maybe use Tag Manager, that sort of stuff. But the better you get at understanding how to use all of these measurement tools, and more importantly, we'll talk about this in just a moment here, how to coordinate them together, they will help you get a much more robust measurement department in place. And that measurement department, remember, it is a flashlight for your organization. It's like, imagine your car breaks down and somebody just looks at it and says, okay, well, what do you think's wrong with it? And the mechanic literally just looks at it and goes like, oh, I guess new transmission, or I guess a new engine. You know what? I think the steering wheel, you know what? Maybe it's wiring. Well, that's what happens with marketing constantly. Nobody knows to lift the hood and check the engine because they don't know. They typically don't have anything that can show them how the engine's working. That's what measurement does. It is your diagnostic tool to help your marketing department level up the marketing. So the same amount of resources they're currently using, you get 10x from it because you have measurement sort of snapped on to marketing, right? It's a piece that supercharges marketing, but it's got to be part of your culture, right? Hence being measurement ready for 2023. Now let's talk briefly about the tools. I'm going to flip over to a different screen here. And this is really how we think about measurement in general. So there's three main stages to every measurement system. You have to collect the information you need to collect, right? Again, why are we collecting information? To get answers to the results and how questions that we're asking so we can take the actions we already planned to take. That's the collect, right? So we collect everything. We have to store it somewhere, typically in some sort of database-like tool. And then we have to build reports from that. Sometimes it's in the tool itself, sometimes outside of the tool, where we report. And this is where we actually interact with the data. This is where your marketing departments will interact with the information so they know what to do next, right? Because they have obviously already planned what actions they're going to take, and that's where they see it, is in the reporting stage. Now, what this looks like from a tools perspective, in general, again, I'm using Google's tools at the moment. If you use other paid tools, insert them here. It's not important that you use Google, though they are free, so that's kind of why we recommend them. But whatever you're using, some sort of tag manager is super important. Obviously, we recommend Google Tag Manager. It's powerful and free, and it is there to be witness to various types of behaviors that are otherwise very difficult to collect. Things like, well, I want to know when somebody's on a certain page, and when they are on this specific page, they have scrolled halfway down, they have clicked on this button, and it's been at least 37 seconds. Tag Manager can do that. It can collect that very specific behavior if that's what you wanted to. And it's not that hard to set up once you learn how to use that tool. So that's why Tag Manager is so important. It's way beyond just, did they see this page? It's what behaviors did they do while they were on that page, right? Very important what Tag Manager can do. So that's why we recommend it as your collection tool. And if you're not using Tag Manager yet, I'd say you're not yet measurement ready for 2023. This is one of the tools you might want to start looking at. Google Analytics 4. Now, once you have Tag Manager collecting information, it's going to have to send that information somewhere because it doesn't store stuff. So Google Analytics 4 is where it can send things. You send it into that platform. Now, Google Analytics 4, still fairly new to the world, still going through some growing pains, but getting better day by day, some days better than others. But Google Analytics 4 is there for you. You send all this information into Google Analytics 4, and you can send it to other platforms too from Tag Manager. So you might send some stuff to Facebook or, Google Ads or server side. I mean, there's a lot of other things you can do. I don't want to overcomplicate it at this stage since we're just talking strategy session. But generally speaking, you use something like a Tag Manager to collect all these behaviors. You then use something like Google Analytics 4 and maybe some of your other platforms you're using to store those behaviors, like which pages they saw, what buttons they're clicking on, what types of events, what type of lead was it, what did they make a purchase. All those behaviors get stored in a platform like Google Analytics 4. And then you use another platform like Looker Studio that's built for reporting so that the reports are easier for your marketing teams to use. Now, I'm not talking to the data analyst here. I'm not talking to the data scientist. I'm not talking to the numbers people who are watching this right now. I'm talking to those of you who are like, I hate numbers. I just know it's like I have to take my medicine and I have to figure out how to deal with them because numbers are important, but I really don't want to have to deal with numbers all day long. I agree with you, especially from a marketing perspective. Marketers should not be looking at data tables and spreadsheets with a billion numbers on them because our eyes are going to glaze over and no one knows what to do with that stuff. So instead, you make a Looker Studio report that's a nice little funnel or a flow chart like breakdown that shows conversion rates in between all the steps. You can use conditional formatting to light stuff up like thumbs up, thumbs down, happy face, smiley face. It's really cool what you can do with a platform like that. So that your marketing team, when they look at your Data Studio report, or previously known as Data Studio, it's now Looker Studio, but when they look at your Looker Studio report, they immediately know what actions they should be taking because they're going to know, is the answer coming in higher than we thought, lower than we thought, or just right? And because they planned it out, which is why that planning step was so important in the framework, they automatically know what to do next. In our personal view, if your marketing team is looking at a dashboard for more than a minute, it needs to be simplified. You have room to improve. So if you're not using Tag Manager to collect behaviors, I'd say you're not measurement ready. That would be a tool to add into it. If you're just using a platform like Google Analytics 4, specifically if you're not using Google Analytics 4, absolutely get on that because Universal Analytics is rapidly going away. And then, and honestly, I think in terms of priority, I would start with Google Analytics 4 if you're not using it yet, then add on Tag Manager, then add on Looker Studio to get really good at reporting. So you can do that. So with those three things in place, you are probably pretty decent when it comes to being measurement ready. Okay, so that's just a real quick note on the different tools that will come in. And we're going to revisit that in just another minute here because I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive to show you kind of what we think is the future, what it seems like is the future when it comes to these measurement tools and some new tools that are coming in and how they all fit together. Now, we talked about planning. We talked about building. The launch is the final step to the framework. And the secret sauce here, we have listening, which is you have to find the story, right? It's all about trends and patterns. We're listening for the story here, right? That's what this is. So you're looking for trends and patterns. Marketing forward is the secret sauce to forecasting. So instead of always looking back in time saying what happened, and this is how you know if you're not measurement ready, if you're asking questions like what happened to the $10,000 you spent last week? That's an okay question, but it's the same question that everybody else around you is asking too, and I'm normally not a fan of that. If I'm asking the same questions everyone else is, I'm going to get the same results everyone else is. And typically when I look around, I don't like the results that other people are getting, so I have to ask better quality questions. Forecasting forces you to ask better quality questions because instead of saying what happened to the $10,000 we spent last week, you start asking questions like what's going to happen to the $10,000 we're going to spend next week? And then you chart it all out. You forecast it out. How do you forecast it? Because you know the story. You've listened to the trends and patterns, so you already kind of have an understanding of what recent past has been doing, so you can start to predict your near future. Now, once you forecast that near future, then you measure against it, and that's where you optimize. And then all you do here is use what we call the expectation engine, where you basically think, okay, what's the step that's not working the way it should be? Like say it's add to offer. Maybe you got a bunch of people coming to the ad or they're clicking on the ad and your click-through rates are good on the ad, but when they come to your offer page, they leave within 10 seconds, right? Again, that's something you can measure with Tag Manager fairly easily. But there's some like obviously disengaged audience. They come to the page, they leave within 10 seconds. They're not engaged sessions. So what would you do? Well, would you change the offer of the page? Probably not. They're not seeing the offer. It's above the fold. They're not even staying more than 10 seconds. It's probably an expectation mismatch. In other words, the ad probably set them up for the wrong expectation, right? And so that when the page loaded, it wasn't quite what they were expecting. Very simple example might be, hey, sweaters are on sale. And then they click on the link to go get sweaters on sale and they see a clothing store pop up, but maybe jeans and shirts are the featured items and there's nothing about the sweater sale. So that's not going to match their expectation that the ad created. So they're going to leave sooner because you're going to make them think and they're not going to do that. They're just going to move on and go look at cat pictures on Facebook or cat videos on TikTok now, I guess would be the new kid on the block. So that's what expectation is all about. You look and say, okay, what is the expectation that was set from the previous step? And did the next step match that expectation properly? If it's not matching the expectation, change that step. Maybe the first step is just setting up the wrong expectation, in which case, going back to that teach the sweaters example, you would change the ads to be like, well, let's not talk about sweaters because we don't have a sweater sale. Let's talk about jeans and shirts and those sales, right? And then you make the ads better match the page. So that's what will help you to optimize. But again, remember, measurement is what tells you where to focus marketing results so that marketing knows to work on that step and they're not randomly guessing as we go through. So putting this all together, and then I'm going to do a little more of a deep dive on some of the new tools that are coming out that I want you to be aware of, especially for 2023. We plan, we build, we launch, right? We're marketing the blind. We want to get to a point where we just use this system to produce revenue and profits. So we build out our plans first. To be measurement ready, you must have a framework, number one. You must have a plan before you start your builds, number two. In the plan, you think about results and how questions. We think about the information, in other words, the behaviors that we're going to have to measure for and collect using Tag Manager or some other tools to get those answers to those questions. And then we already have an understanding, a plan, in other words, of what actions we're going to take using that if this, then that. So if the answer is lower than what we think it's going to be, we're going to do this. If the answer comes in higher than what we think it's going to be, we're going to do this other action. And if the answer is within range of where we think it's supposed to be, then we're going to do this third action. But you already know what you're going to do when the reports show up. It's so important to do that. Then you move into the build. That's where the tools come in. So with Google Analytics 4, as an example, you would set up conversion events to measure ACE, aware of the customer journey or the user journey that you're measuring for when they complete that journey as they engage along the way. Then you measure the traffic, make sure the UTMs are being used to identify the who, what, and why. Then the setup. That, of course, means you have to learn how to use the tools. So maybe you start off just using Google Analytics 4. Eventually, you start off you then move into adding Google Tag Manager so that you can get more specific information, better quality information, so you can answer more specific, more useful questions. And then eventually, maybe you use Looker Studio so that you can get the story even faster so that your marketing team can look at their reports and be in and out within a minute, because they don't want to stare at numbers. I get it. I'm kind of the same way. I am numbers tolerant, but I don't want to stare at numbers all day long either. I need to get back to work, right? So do they. So as a measurement professional, it's your job to help your marketing team use measurement to empower them, right? To guide them so they know where to focus their resources. So this is where the measurement team starts coming in to help get to the story part. Then they help guide the marketing team by saying, listen, here's the trends and patterns. Here's what the current conversation is between the website and the users, or here's how the users are interacting with this specific user journey that we're measuring for, right? Whatever the behaviors are, you get your initial trends and patterns and you've got your benchmarks of how things currently work. Then you start to build a forecast, right? You can work and say, well, here's how we think based upon the recent past. Here's how the near future is going to work. So you make that important mental shift. And again, you're not measurement ready if you're not forecasting. You make that important measurement, that mindset shift. Instead of looking back last week and saying what happened last week, you're starting to say, here's what's going to happen next week. That is such an important shift, and it's powerful. You will literally start to feel like you can foretell the future when you get really good at this. And it's an incredible feeling to be able to say, hey, more than likely, here's how many units we're going to sell. Here's how we're going to sell those. Here's how it's going to work. And then you measure against that to see how close you got. It's an amazing feeling when you're doing that. And remember, it's not about being right. I think that's a problem with most forecasts. People think they need to be right. It's not about being right. It's about having an intention of how things are supposed to work. Going back with that car example, we talked about the car breaking down. When you start your car, you already have a forecast. You just don't realize it, but you have a forecast. You have an understanding, an expectation of how that car is supposed to sound when it starts, right? So you hit the button, it's just supposed to go, vroom, the engine starts up. But what if you hit the button, it goes, well, that's a weird sound, right? It would not match your forecast. So now you know, I have to optimize that. Their engine is definitely broken. I know it's in the engine. It's making the sound there. I can tell the mechanic this is where it is so they can get the car fixed. Marketing is the same way. Marketing is exactly the same way. So you measure against your forecast, and that's what will point to the optimization step. And then you use the expectation engine to say, okay, what exactly is happening here? Was it the prior step that did not set up the proper expectation? Or was it the step that, that next step that actually mismatched the expectation? In other words, the expectation was set properly by the ads, but it wasn't set properly. It wasn't received by maybe the offer page they landed on. And so then now at least marketing knows what actions to take. And remember, they've already planned out those actions. So this is the optimization step, should be fairly fast so you can get results much faster. Measurement done well tells you what's working, it tells you what's not, and it tells you what's coming next. So if you don't know those questions, if you don't know answers to those 3 questions, you're just not measurement ready for 2023. More than likely, I would say it's probably because you don't have a measurement framework. Whether you use this one or some other one, you have to have a framework. You have to have a recipe of how measurement is supposed to work. So to use this, right, it roughly takes about 90 days if you're first timer going through this, because it's going to be a little clunky. It's a new skill. And I cannot emphasize this enough. We are on the exact same path you are. We're probably just thousands of revolutions of this ahead of you. That's it. But we were very much on the exact same part of the path that you are standing on now. So give yourself a good 90 days to get through this and learn the basics. Incidentally, we do teach this for the free Toolbox members. We actually give you an entire course, about 3.5 hours, that goes through this framework in great detail, so you can really nail it down, right? So feel free for those of you who are free Toolbox members to go through that. Now, if you have no clear roadmap, in other words, you're not sure what questions you should be asking or what you would even do with the information if you had it, that's because you have no plan. So you make sure you plan things out so you have a clear roadmap of what you're trying to measure and what you're going to do with it. Then you move into the build. When you're done your build, you still have these reports that sort of are chaotic reports. There's a bunch of information but no story, a bunch of data but no action. That is because the build went wrong. You're not measuring results using ACE. You don't have your traffic UTMs coordinated, and probably you haven't set up, meaning the story isn't quite there because maybe you didn't use the tool properly or combine the tools in a way that they need to be combined. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So once you get through your build, right, you always have to have a plan first. This is like a foundational thing. You must have your plan before your build. But once you have your build done properly, you should start seeing a natural story there. In other words, the reports become more useful. Even if you're using the reports in Google Analytics 4, just the built-in stuff, you should still see that a little bit more useful than by default. Then, if you have this problem where your team this is a Dan Kennedy term, I believe, random acts of marketing. It means they're just guessing, right? Somebody comes in and says, I was at a mastermind group the other day and they say we should do this. Or I was on a Zoom call with a friend of mine and they suggested this. I was just talking with the management team and they said we should try this. Somebody had this idea, right? That's random acts of marketing. That's guessing. We are professionals. We shouldn't have to guess when it comes to marketing. I'm all for creativity. I'm just not for guessing. So random acts of marketing, if that's happening, it's because you might have a great plan, you might have an incredible build, but you're not launching it properly. In other words, you're not using measurement properly. So you listen to the trends and patterns. You make sure you're forecasting, right? Always talking about what's going to happen next week or next month or next quarter. And then you're measuring against that. And that's where you optimize. So when you do that, you will know what's coming next and be able to consistently improve things. So that is the measurement marketing framework in a nutshell, and quite a bit more deep dive than we've done before on these trainings, because it is so important to make sure that your organization is measurement ready, that you have a framework, and in our opinion, these 3 steps with these keys in place. If you have all of this, by default, you will be measurement ready. The tools will change as you go, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but you will be measurement ready. You'll know how to use measurement to improve marketing. Remember, measurement's kind of like a turbocharger that you snap on to the existing engine that is your marketing team. That's why measurement is a department now. It's not just a job anymore. It's a department because there's so much to it. But it's worth the investment because it supercharges your marketing. All right, let's talk about the tools briefly just one more time. Now I'm going to go back into the Lucidchart we had earlier. We talked about a sort of a general layout of the tools, how we have this collect, store, and report thing going on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up here and I'm going to talk about some other tools that are coming into existence. And this is not an exhaustive list of everything, but I wanted to kind of generally show you, like, here's how everything starts to fit together. So we talked about Tag Manager, right? Tag Manager's job is to collect behaviors, right? That's it. If a purchase occurs, it collects that behavior and all the details around what was purchased and how much, etc. If a page view occurs, it knows the page they're on. If a lead occurs, it knows that they just became a lead, right? All of that sort of stuff happens in Tag Manager. Then it sends that information to a platform to store, right? This is the Google Analytics 4 stuff. So now Google Analytics 4 is the platform that would store it. Now, of course, Tag Manager can also send it to other platforms like Facebook, right? So you have that happening too. Facebook or TikTok, whatever else, other ad platforms, you might need to know that a certain page was loaded or a lead event occurred or a purchase, or et cetera. So that's the first step. You send the information to storage. Now, Google Analytics 4 happens to be able to connect well with, of course, Google properties like Search Console. So that will help you out with your SEO. You connect Search Console to Google Analytics 4, and you connect Google Ads to Google Analytics 4. So you have those two information. Your Google Ads spend automatically shows up in Google Analytics 4. Your Search Console results and queries and all that sort of stuff automatically show up in Google Analytics 4. So now in Google Analytics 4, otherwise known as GA4, you are able to see all these different platforms starting to come together to tell a natural story. Again, assuming that you've got your ACE results set up, your UTMs are coordinated, and you've set up the platform correctly, right, to get a good story. Once you have all of that, then you start connecting it into Looker Studio. Now, this is a platform, again, Looker Studio is there. It has one purpose. It is to just build reports. That's what it does well. So Tag Manager just collects information. Google Analytics 4, GA4, we use this just to store information, and that's it. And then we use Looker Studio to actually get the reports. And that's what our marketing team is looking at. So our measurement team will actually work with the marketing team to say, here's what we're seeing, and here's what we suggest you guys do, and here's what our focus, and yada, yada. But it all happens in Looker Studio. The beauty of Looker Studio is that it can connect with other things as well. So I'm going to pull these down here. So if you have a spreadsheet with different data, which of course we do, maybe it's a lead count, or maybe you have a sales team that's talking about sales calls and how many were closed, et cetera, et cetera. Well, those Google Sheet data can plug into Looker Studio. And there's the new platform that's you're probably going to have to start getting used to, I would assume in 2023 for sure, is BigQuery. It's a database. So MySQL databases, things like that. Sounds really complicated, but Google Analytics 4, fortunately, automatically connects into BigQuery now. So Google Analytics 4 can send its information to Looker Studio, but it also sends it to BigQuery as well. So sometime what will happen, eventually what will happen, is you'll probably end up disconnecting directly from GA4 and you go from BigQuery into Looker Studio. And that's how it starts to look. So this is starting to happen a little bit. We're playing around with this at the moment. It's a little bit cutting edge stuff, but I do see a lot more companies more than likely doing something like this. They collect the information with Tag Manager. They then have Google Analytics 4, which sends it to BigQuery, which goes into Looker Studio, and that's how they get their data. So you don't have to use BigQuery to be measurement ready for 2023, but it is something that when you set up your Google Analytics 4, because it's free to set up BigQuery as well, or at least to create the account, it's relatively inexpensive. It is a paid thing. BigQuery is paid, but it's relatively inexpensive. Ours costs pennies per month. It's not a big deal. Obviously, it could be different for you, but this is kind of where things are headed. So I would say this is probably like a mid to end 2023, early 2024. Probably everybody's using BigQuery at this point, or could be, right? So that's how this fits in. Finally, let's talk about other first-party data. We talked about this collection stuff with Tag Manager, but other things as well. So we've got platforms like we use Infusionsoft for our platform. So we get information from Infusionsoft. Like when I measure for the number of purchases that have occurred, I do not ask Google Analytics 4 because Google Analytics 4 is just a representation of behaviors. It's not the truth, right? It's just a representation of the truth. The Infusionsoft, in our case, our CRM is Infusionsoft. That is our cart. So that is the thing that actually made sure the credit card went through, that actually knows if a successful transaction went through. Google Analytics 4 does not know that. It just it records whatever it gets told to record, and that's it. But other platforms that have first-party data, like your CRM, they're going to be better uses. They're going to be much more useful truth for certain answers, like purchases, maybe leads, right? Things like that. So what we'll do is let me see if I can pull some of these up, make me some room here. We will pull some of this first-party data, and while we don't put it into Tag Manager, we are still collecting it with those platforms. Then what we'll do is we'll bring it across and we'll pop it into a sheet. And then when we have that in our Google Sheet, then it goes into Looker Studio. So at the end of the day, everyone's coming in here looking to Looker Studio from a marketing perspective, the marketing team, the measurement team. This is where we're mostly interacting with stuff. And remember, the goal for our measurement team is to make sure that marketing spends less than a minute in the dashboard before they're back to work. They go back, they know what actions they're going to take because it was part of the plan. We talked about that already. And that's how the whole thing works. So this is just another more of a slightly more detailed view of how the different tools can fit together to make sure that you're measurement ready for 2023. I would suggest heavily, if you're not using Tag Manager, GA4, and Looker Studio, those are the three that you want to invest in for 2023, and they're free. Again, depending how big your company is, they're most likely going to be free for you, as they are for most of the world. But you need to invest time in learning these tools, right? Whether you take courses from us or somebody else that helps you, you make sure you invest in these 3 tools and learning these in order of priority. Google Analytics 4 first, then Tag Manager, then Looker Studio. So if you already know GA4 and Tag Manager, start to look to Looker Studio. If you just now know GA4, you want to start adding Tag Manager into the mix because that's going to help you simplify all the other platforms that are getting measurement stuff. And then eventually you finalize it with Looker Studio. And then you just get better at building reports that your marketing team can look at and then within a minute, get back to work. That is the idea. So with that, what was your one thing from this whole little adventure? I think going back to the framework here, this is the most important steps, the planning and the launch step. The build is fairly routine. It's really just your implementation team. They do have to do it in a certain way, but it's not really that complicated when you understand how to use the tools like Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4 or Looker Studio. The planning step, though, people that do not set up their actions first, and in the launch phase, people that are chasing accuracy. I don't say accuracy very often because it's the A word here at measurementmarketing.io. There is no such thing as accuracy. Stop chasing it. It doesn't exist. It's a waste of your time. Trends and patterns are what you want. That's the listening step. That's the biggest thing I see that happens with a launch. The second biggest thing, of course, is the forecast, where if they're chasing accuracy, then they don't forecast anyway. But if you have trends and patterns, it's typically that they're not forecasting. So making sure that you have your actions in your planning step before you do anything else, you already have a plan for what actions you're going to take. And then you have a forecast so that you're asking what's going to happen next week. And more specifically, here's what's going to happen next week. And here are the different stages, right? So we're going to spend $10,000. We're going to do $1 per click. Our click-through rate's going to be this. That means this many people should see the page, which means this many people should become a lead, which means this many people should close within 7 days from the autoresponder series at this average ticket to equal this much revenue. And I know that sounds complicated as I'm rattling that off, but it can literally be like that. We do that. So you can absolutely grow to that point. It may not happen tomorrow, but it can certainly happen in 2023 so that you are more measurement ready. And that's just part of how you can use measurement to improve your own marketing departments. All right. Now, next week's edition is another strategy session because we happen to have 2 Wednesdays in this month. So we're going to talk about using UTMs correctly, specifically for ad managers. So those of you running paid ads, we're going to talk about how you can kind of combine them and make sure that they're all coordinated so that you can properly identify who's sending you traffic, what type of traffic, and why they are sending it your way. If you want that, just make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Of course, you have the other option of joining the Measurement Marketing Academy. Now, I mentioned this earlier. We have a free edition called the Toolbox Edition. It comes with the most recent Workshop Wednesday, so you always see whatever that one is back there. All the tools that we offered for our members. So you've got a bunch of exclusive tools we created just for our members that you have access to as well. And I mentioned earlier, you also have that free course. It's called Win, the Measurement Marketing Framework. And it is all about the framework, a much more deeper dive because obviously there's a little bit more to it. But I wanted to at least use this workshop so you could see what the general idea was and go like, okay, we really should have a recipe for how measurement is going to be used in our organization. That's all a framework is. So when you use that framework, then your measurement will produce better results for your marketing, right? So they can ultimately give you higher revenue and profits. All right. The other option, of course, is if you'd like to become a paid member, we have the Measurement Marketing Academy for marketers, for professionals, and Academy for agencies and teams. To see the current options that are available to you, including the free edition, just go to measure.tips/get academy to learn more. With that, we'll go ahead and bring this one to a close. This has been Strategy Session. Are you measurement ready for 2023? Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we'll see you on the